RuneScape is undeniably a game that exists. The way that every skill feeds into a web of other skills is pretty great design. It encourages players to experience everything the world has to offer, ensures that you always have another goal to chase, and helps you forget what the sun looks like. But it was also made over 20 years ago at this point, and so some of its design decisions are a little strange. And I haven't seen anyone do a full-on deep dive on the subject yet, so since I'm a YouTuber, TM, seeing an uncovered topic is like the British Empire seeing an undiscovered foreign land. So let's colonise this bad boy. Each video will be covering one of old school RuneScape's 23 sanctimonious skills, covering 6 main topic areas. 1. What was the skill meant to achieve? What was the intention behind the skill? What niche is it meant to fill? For this section, we'll be talking about the skills as they were in their 2007 backup state, as this gives us a benchmark point to refer to as the original design of the skill, that we can then compare to what modern design is like today. 2. Does it succeed in this goal? Based on the way the skill is designed, does it fulfill the purpose it seems to be trying to fill? 3. What's good about the skill? Does it feel good to engage with and worthwhile to level? Do you want to do it, or is it doomed to be your Tears of Guthix reward for all eternity? 4. What's bad about the skill? The much more interesting what's wrong with it. We'll go over what's lacking in the skill, where it falls short, and where the dead content lies. Number 5. The old school era. In this section, we'll look into how the modern old school team has tried to bring the skill out of the past and into something more recent like 2013. And number 6, what would render do? Objectivity? No! Opinions now! There's no way I'm letting you all off the hook without some hot takes, so this is the part where I tell you what I think could be added or changed to make the skill even better. Of course, I don't have the Gower brothers on Discord to ask for the official story, and Modash has me blocked on Twitter for some reason, so I won't know the 100% correct intentions behind everything. But we can infer a lot of this from how the game is built and go from there. Right, that was a lot of words, but I promise that it's just for this first episode. For future videos, I'll just refer back to these. I won't make you listen to them again. So let's get into it. Woodcutting is a skill that needs no introduction. Woodcutting is a production skill, meaning that it creates resources and adds them to the economy. The only thing a player has to spend to get them is time. Production skills serve to be, at least in theory, the main way that many items enter the game. The supply chain starts at a production skill, then goes to various processing skills to be turned into usable items, and then those items go out to players to be used in the world for various purposes. Woodcutting, unsurprisingly, revolves around the log. If you ever punched a tree in Minecraft, then you owe it all to RuneScape, because we lived for the chop back in the day. Woodcutting is a very appealing skill to every new player, as it makes complete intuitive sense. Chop trees to get wood, we've all seen trees before, and trees are everywhere in Gielinor, so it serves as a great way to bring purpose to huge stretches of the game world that in most of the games would just be pointless scenery to walk past on the way to the real content. But in RuneScape, every tree is content. I might be being a bit dramatic, but adding this small interactivity to such a common game scenery object creates such a huge amount of gameplay space that I think it's worth celebrating. Here's a story I bet is familiar. One time, as a noob, I was woodcutting in Lumbridge, clicking every tree I saw. As I followed the flora in my deforestation spree, I opened my eyes to find myself in a strange new place covered in white brick walls. I had just discovered Falador, all because I was enjoying woodcutting so much. Chopping trees had encouraged me to explore to find new trees to chop, and thus opened up a whole new world to play in. That's the power of the interactive tree. Okay, so chopping trees is fun, but what do you actually do with the logs? Well, the first thing you're introduced to is fire making. Light your logs with a tinderbox to make a fire, anywhere, anytime. You can then use that fire as your own personal camping stove to cook any food you might have on hand from fishing or murdering cows. Tutorial Island makes this seem like something you'll be doing often, and I remember imagining it being something I would do all the time. Oh, I'll just get my woodcutting up and fire making to 60, so I can chop and burn yew logs. That way, if I'm ever fighting a monster near yew trees, I'll be able to cook some food there and won't need to bank. Woot! Yes, we said woot back then. But that dream never really panned out. The map just isn't designed for it. There are vanishingly few spots in Gielinor where you can fight monsters and get raw food and get logs to burn to cook them. And even if you find one, there's always going to be a normal tree nearby to use for logs, so you'll never need to access a higher tier tree to do this. But again, you probably won't do it anyway. For example, imagine you were killing barbarians in their namesake village, as we all did. There are fishing spots next to the village where you could fish for trout, salmon, and if you're some kind of psycho, pike. If you brought a fishing rod, feathers, an axe, and a tinderbox with you, you could, in theory, catch fish, make your own fire, cook the fish, and then keep your slaying flowing smoothly. But even if we ignore the fact that there is a permanent fire here and an infinite spawn of free cooked meat, it still wouldn't make sense to do this whole shebang when you could just walk a few yards up the road and use Edgefield Bank to access all the food you'd ever need. Yes, sure, you could do this if you really wanted to, just like you could mine Runite with a bronze pickaxe, but why would you when it's objectively bad? From a game design perspective, you want the fun things to do and the correct things to do to be as close as possible, and in this case, I wouldn't say that it is. I feel this self-sufficient survivalist playstyle was something that was originally intended to be a common gameplay loop, but either forgotten about or scrapped in favour of more distinct and compartmentalised training areas. This area is going to be for woodcutting, this area is going to be for fishing, this area is going to be for combat, and so on. So as a means to get items, the skill works very well. It's so simple that even a baby can do it, but as a skill to use in everyday gameplay, it falls a bit short. Woodcutting's simplicity is probably its greatest strength. It's so accessible that it's very common to see it as any noob's highest skill. It's also supremely chilled. Click on a yew tree and you've got anywhere from 30 seconds to 5 minutes before you have to click again. You can watch a movie, play another game, with that comfortable feeling that you're still progressing even while you're away. It's essentially the prototype for the idle games we've all seen by now. It also has a very natural and rewarding progression curve. In the beginning, you're chopping normal trees, one log at a time, very slowly. But within a few levels you can start chopping oak trees that survive much longer than normal trees, giving you a massively tangible reward very early on. But those normal trees are also much faster to chop now, going down in just a few swings, so you feel accomplished in that respect too. In your adventures, you'll likely stumble upon some big massive yew tree, you'll instinctively click on it, only to find that you need to get your woodcutting up to start chopping it. This presents a really nice carrot on a stick moment. Of course you'll now want to chop it. You'll bet that people who can chop that tree must be really cool, and the logs must be worth something good. This natural goal-setting behaviour is exactly what you want your players to be doing. It feels great to always have something to aim for, and woodcutting pulls that off very well since trees are everywhere. I'd like to start off every what's wrong with it section by going over the skill guide and marking out which pieces of content a reasonable player will actually do. It's an easy way to highlight all the dead content in a skill and get a feel for how much of it people will engage with. So let's do that. Green means that the content will be engaged with a good amount by the average player in their RuneScape career. Yellow means the content might be engaged with a small amount or is good in some niche cases. And red means that no reasonable player will use it at all. All the use for it is so niche that it comes up once and then is immediately discarded. So how does woodcutting shape up? Honestly, compared to other skills we'll get to later, pretty good. Most of the trees have some good gameplay functions. Early trees like normals and oaks get you those early levels, and the logs still have value later on as they're needed to make planks for construction. Mid-tier trees like willows and teaks are your best trees to chop for experience. Although it is a shame that the best training methods are unlocked at such a low level, this is a problem with basically every skill, so it's not just a woodcutting thing. High tier trees fulfill the role of being the AFK option. Depending on what mood you're in on any given day, you'll switch between the high tier and mid tier trees that best match what you're after. As for the miscellaneous section, the lumberjack outfit has the nice bonus of being the only experience boosting outfit that is strictly worth getting on your way to 99, which is the maximum training most players will do. Canoes are an interesting transport option, but generally speaking they don't come up very often, as they have this long animation making them slow to use, and needing to carry an axe around with you all the time to use them presents this opportunity cost that most people just aren't going to bother with. Not to mention that they quickly got obsoleted by the standard teleport spells you'll soon unlock as well. The one exception I would say is the Whacker Canoe, as this provides transport to an area in the wilderness that doesn't have any other good transport options, and I still use it to this day. There are still all those reds though, so let's talk about them. Achy trees will be chopped exactly twice, once to do big chompy bird hunting, and again during Recipe for Disaster. That's it. Remember, collection logs and achievement diaries didn't exist in 07, so no one is going to be doing chompy hunting at this point. Cutting jungle wood is equally pointless, there's no intrinsic rewards worth going for in the Typo Wani Cleano minigame. I've marked bark as yellow as it's needed to make split bark armor, which some people would have still used back then. Arctic pines, as well as splitting them and turning them into shields, aren't going to be touched after the Friendly Isles quest. And most people won't bother making the first tier of the canoe as it takes so long and gives such a short distance that you may as well just walk. Overall, it's a pretty good skill guide. I'd give it an A rank. All the main trees have a good use, which is what really matters at the end of the day. What about problems with woodcutting as a whole? Well, let's start with the downside of its biggest strength, the chillness. While it is nice to have a low effort activity to do when you're in that mood, there's not much you can do to speed it up and put in more effort when you want to be fully engaged playing the game. Yes, tick manipulation methods exist, but they're not intended features, so I'm not going to be considering them for this. Even if you're chopping something fast like teaks, you're essentially forced to sit and watch your character, doing nothing for minutes on end, with the only optimization being to click the next tree as soon as the first one falls. It gets boring pretty quickly and basically requires some secondary entertainment to keep you going. If that's what you want, it's great, but if you're looking to give the game your full attention, then woodcutting just doesn't work for that. There's also a problem with rewards. The primary use for most of the logs you'll be chopping is to be fletched into bows. I'll talk more about this in the fletching video, but due to the way this works, these bows will always be sat at their high elk price, and the logs used to make them will sit just below that, meaning that woodcutting is forever doomed to be a low profit skill. There just aren't enough good uses for the thousands of logs that enter the game every day. So if you're leveling it with the hopes of becoming rich, you're going to be sorely disappointed. I could mention some other things like the lack of variety and diversity in the content, but this is an issue with basically every skill as well, so I'm not going to repeat it every video. I like you all more than that. So how has the old school team updated woodcutting to make it better? Well, the big obvious one is forestry, which is so good I'm actually doing it right now on another screen as I type this. Forestry came with a bunch of nice features, such as making trees last way longer when chopped in large groups, which fixes the antisocial reforced competition problem it used to have, so that's nice. The added events also encourage you to check back every so often and engage with the game, as they require constant attention while doing them to get the most out of them, and they're rewarding enough to feel worthwhile, so it does make woodcutting more engaging to train as a whole. The forestry reward shop does make the whole thing seem a little mini-gamey, which I'm not a huge fan of, but that's a pretty minor complaint. Before the big change that was forestry, we had some smaller additions too. Redwood served as a double down on the AFK side of the skill, having some of the longest potential AFK time of any activity in the game, though the logs themselves have only some minor niche uses, making them rather pointless to do anything with other than drop. There's also Suliceps, which provide a good active method to train. The constant moving around of the shrooms means you have to pay attention, and the XP rate is good enough to warrant the extra effort. It's also nice to get something that isn't logs for a change. Blisterwoods are also a thing, but other than a niche AFK training method, most people will chop them exactly once, ever, for the quest that they're in, and then never again. Overall, before forestry, woodcutting had barely changed at all in the 10 years that old school has existed. I think most of us, and Jagex as well, had resigned the skill to that one newbie AFK skill I do when watching movies and left it at that. But I think it deserves better, so let's see what we can come up with. In these sections, I'll be throwing out wild ideas I'd like added to the skills I'm talking about, but it's important to try and maintain the original identity of the skill as well. Otherwise, we're not improving things as much as we're just changing them into something completely different, so I'll try not to go overboard on the ideas. With that in mind, the biggest thing woodcutting needs, in my opinion, is more and better uses for logs in general, especially the high tier ones. It's hard to come up with concrete ideas off the top of my head, especially when we don't want to disrupt existing content. Whatever these uses are though, they need to use a substantial amount of logs, and whatever it produces needs to be consumed in some way. This then creates a constant demand on the logs, ensuring that the price can stay reasonably high and make chopping worth doing. Maybe certain foods that can only be cooked on campfires from a certain type of log, or maybe we can create types of special compost by rotting logs from high level trees. These are just some base concepts I just thought of, but I think it shows that more is possible than just chop log, fletch log, elk bow. I'd also like to see that survivalist concept leaned into more. Imagine dungeons designed in such a way that you can be self-sufficient there, killing monsters, catching fish, and then chopping trees and making campfires to cook that fish and go back into the fight. But only if you've got your levels high enough to take advantage of the resources available. Imagine only yew trees would be available in one of them, or only magic trees, so you'd have to get your woodcutting and firemaking up to make use of them. It would then create a great reason beyond just selling logs to encourage players to get their skill levels up to improve their own experience in the game. On a crazier note, I think woodcutting would benefit from some added variety. If we stretch what the word wood means a little, we could be using our skills to chop things like kraken tentacles or evil plants that fight back. This would help add some excitement to the skill for when we want to chop something other than harmless trees. It would also help to better tie woodcutting to other skills. Imagine having to catch the kraken with fishing first before chopping it back down to size. A lot more is possible if we're willing to think a little outside the pixelated box. Beyond that, maybe add some trees between levels to fill content gaps. The 75 to 90 gap is particularly large, and I'd say we're good to go. And that's a wrap. I think that's everything I wanted to say about woodcutting. It's not quite 6 hours, but it's honest work. Overall, I'd say woodcutting is in a pretty good place, at least in the grand scheme of skills. At the end of each video, I'm going to give each skill a rank. rating where it lines up with the other skills, and I'd give woodcutting a solid B rank. It's intuitive, it's easy to level, but the rewards are pretty lackluster. If you like stuff like this, please do let me know, and I'll make more. I want to try and do all the skills eventually, but if there's a particular skill you want to see first, then let me know and I can bump it up the list for you. And of course, all of this is just one guy's worthless opinions on the internet, so if you think differently, do feel free to leave a comment to let me know. We'll talk about it, we'll get lunch, make a day of it, it'll be nice. Thanks for watching. Remember to click the buttons on your way out, and I'll see you next time. Peace.